The ceiling came down in pieces, and I did not move. Dust rolled across the throne room like smoke from a dying fire, and somewhere above us, another shell hit the outer wall and shook the whole palace down to its bones. I stood in front of the queen with my rifle raised, my ears ringing, and I counted the seconds between each blast, because counting was the only thing keeping my hands steady. 4 seconds, then another hit, 4 seconds again. The Kryzen army was already inside the gates. I could hear them through the broken wall, thousands of boots on stone, moving together like one creature instead of many. They were not shouting yet, that was the frightening part. An army that does not shout is an army that already believes it has won. Queen Ariel Ven stood behind me, one hand pressed against the shattered throne to keep herself upright. Her pale gray skin had gone almost white from the strain of the last few hours, and her long fingers trembled slightly, though her voice, when she finally spoke, did not. "Daniel," she said, "leave me." I did not turn around right away. I kept my eyes on the doorway, on the only way into this room, and I answered without looking at her. "No. You cannot win this fight. There is no version of this where you win. Didn't ask if I could win, asked if I'm staying." She made a small sound, something between frustration and disbelief, a sound I had never heard from her in the 6 months I had guarded her. Vesthara royalty were not built to argue. They were built to command, and to be obeyed, and nothing about my answer fit into either of those categories. "You are one man," she said. "They are an army. I am ordering you to leave this room and save yourself." "With respect, ma'am, you gave up the right to order me around about 4 minutes ago, when you told me to leave the first time and I said no. Can't unrefuse an order. Doesn't work that way." Another shell hit, closer this time, and part of the wall behind the throne cracked open like an egg. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of burning stone and something sharper underneath it, something that smelled like fear. She looked at me then, really looked, the way she used to look at reports before signing them, searching for anything she might have missed. "You do not owe me this," she said quietly. "I am not your queen. I am not even your people's ally by treaty. I am a dying monarch of a dying house, and you are a soldier who was assigned to guard me because no one else wanted the post." "You're right," I said. "Nobody else wanted it." "Then why are you still here?" I finally turned to look at her, just for a second, because some things need to be said face to face. Because 6 months ago, this was a job. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being one. I turned back before she could answer, because the first of them had reached the doorway. They came through 2 at a time, the archway too narrow for more, their armor scraping against the broken stone. I raised my rifle and fired before they had fully stepped through, and the first 2 dropped where they stood, blocking the path for the ones behind them. It was not glory, it was simple math. A narrow doorway meant I only had to face 2 enemies at once, and 2 at once, with a good weapon and steady hands, was a number I could work with. "Behind the pillar," I called back to her. "Now, stay low. I do not take cover while my guard bleeds for me. You do today. Move." To my surprise, she moved. Maybe it was the tone in my voice, or maybe some part of her finally understood that arguing with me was costing us both time we did not have. She slipped behind the broken marble pillar near the back wall, and I turned my full attention back to the doorway. The next wave came faster, more of them at once, pressing forward despite the ones falling in front of them. I kept my shots controlled, kept my breathing even, kept my mind on the doorway and nothing else. Panic kills faster than any weapon does. I had learned that a long time ago, in training exercises that felt like a lifetime before this one. A blade came through the gap between 2 fallen soldiers, aimed low, and I twisted just enough that it caught my side instead of my stomach. Pain flared bright and sharp, but I did not go down. I put the soldier holding the blade on the ground and kept firing. "Daniel," her voice, from behind the pillar, tight with worry. "You are hurt." I'm upright. That's the metric that matters right now. That is not how injuries work. Sure it is, if you don't think about it too hard. I heard something that might have been a laugh, cut short by the sound of another explosion somewhere above us. More dust rained down. The archway groaned, threatening to collapse entirely, and for a moment, I almost hoped it would, because a collapsed doorway would do my job for me. But it held, barely, and the soldiers kept coming. I do not remember exactly how long the next stretch lasted. Time gets strange when you are doing this kind of work. I remember running low on charge for my rifle and switching to the melee grip built into its stock, using it like a heavy metal club when the ammunition ran thin. I remember my leg buckling once, just once, and forcing it straight again, through sheer stubbornness, because sitting down at that moment felt like a worse idea than staying up. I remember her voice, closer now than before, calling out numbers. 2 on your left, 1 circling right. I glanced back, just for a second, and saw that she had left the safety of the pillar. She stood a few steps behind me, her eyes fixed past my shoulder, watching the parts of the room I could not see while my attention was locked on the doorway. "I told you to stay covered," I said, blocking a strike and driving my attacker back with the flat of my rifle. "You are 1 set of eyes. I am giving you a 2nd set. Use them." I did not argue. There was no time to argue, and honestly, she was right. Having someone watch my back, even someone who had never held a weapon in her life, was better than fighting blind. 3 coming up the left side," she called. "They are trying to flank the pillar." I shifted my stance, cutting off the angle before they could use it, and 2 of them went down before they even got close. The 3rd turned and ran back through the doorway, disappearing into the crowd still pressing forward outside. "You are better with numbers than you let on," I said, breathing hard. "I have spent my whole life reading reports and counting outcomes. This is simply a faster version of the same skill." For a strange moment, in the middle of all that noise and dust and danger, something almost like a smile crossed her face. Then another wave of soldiers reached the doorway, and the moment was gone. I do not know how many came through that archway in total. Enough that my arms ached and my vision blurred at the edges from exhaustion. Enough that I lost count of how many times I thought this would be the wave that finally broke through. But every time, the narrow doorway did its work, turning an army into a slow trickle, 1 or 2 at a time, and every time, I found something left in me to keep standing. At some point, the Queen's voice changed. It was no longer sharp with fear, but steady, almost calm, the same voice she used when giving instructions to her staff. "You are slowing down," she said. "Your right side is weaker than your left. Favor your left when you strike." "Since when do you give combat advice?" "Since I have been watching you fight for the better part of an hour and learning your patterns. Someone has to notice these things, since you clearly are too busy to notice them yourself." Despite everything, I laughed, a short, breathless sound that surprised even me. Fair point. The attacks slowed after that, not because the enemy had given up, but because something outside had drawn their attention away. I could hear shouting now, different from before, urgent and confused rather than confident. Something was happening beyond the walls that I could not see, and for a moment, hope flickered in my chest, thin and fragile, but real. "What is that?" she asked. "No idea, but it sounds like trouble for them, not for us." The doorway stayed empty for the first time in what felt like hours. I used the pause to check my side, where the earlier cut had soaked through my uniform, dark and warm. It was not good, but it was not the kind of wound that would stop me either, not yet. "You need attention for that," she said, stepping closer despite my earlier warning. "Later. Right now I need you to stay behind that pillar in case they come back. They may not come back at all, if whatever is happening outside continues. Or they might come back angrier. Get behind the pillar." She did not move immediately, and for a second, I thought we were about to have the same argument all over again. Instead, she reached out and pressed her hand briefly against my uninjured shoulder, a gesture I had never seen her use with anyone, not once in 6 months. "Thank you," she said simply. "Whatever happens next. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." "No, but you are still standing. That alone is worth acknowledging." I did not have time to answer, because the doorway was suddenly full of movement again, but this time it was different. Instead of Kryzen soldiers pressing forward, I saw shapes falling back, retreating in a hurry, shouting something in their own language that my translator struggled to keep up with. Something about reinforcements. Something about the sky. Then I heard it myself. Engines. Familiar ones. Human ones. screamed low over the broken palace roof, their thrusters cutting through the dust and smoke, and for the first time since the shelling started, the sound in the air was not explosions but something closer to rescue. "Is that," she started, disbelief plain in her voice, "your people?" "Took them long enough." The remaining soldiers at the doorway broke and ran, choosing retreat over facing fresh human forces, and I finally allowed myself to lower my rifle, just slightly, though I did not let go of it entirely. Old habits do not disappear just because the danger seems to be easing. "You held that doorway," she said, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time, "against an entire advance force, alone. Wasn't alone the whole time. You called out flanks for me near the end. That counts. It does not compare to what you did. Doesn't have to compare, just has to add up to us still being here." The dropships landed in the courtyard beyond the broken walls, and within minutes, boots were moving through the corridors outside, calling out in clipped, professional voices, clearing rooms one by one. When the first squad reached the throne room and found me standing in a doorway surrounded by fallen soldiers, with the queen of a dying house standing just behind me, holding a blade she had picked up from the ground herself, nobody said anything for a long moment. Then the squad leader, a woman named Grace Miller with sharp eyes and an even sharper voice, stepped forward and looked me over. "You're the one who refused the recall order. Guilty. You do know, refusing a direct recall is a serious offense. Do it again if I have to." She studied me a moment longer, then looked past me at the queen, who stood with quiet dignity despite the dust in her hair and the blade still gripped loosely in her hand. "Your Grace," Grace said, offering a respectful nod. "Glad to see you're safe." "I am safe because of him," the queen answered, without hesitation. "Make sure that is written clearly in whatever report you file." "Yes, ma'am." They moved us out through the ruined corridors soon after, past broken statues and cracked murals that had once told the story of 1,000 years of rule, now half buried under rubble that would take years to clear, if anyone ever bothered. The queen walked beside me the entire way, refusing the offer of a support chair, insisting she could walk on her own, even though I could see the effort it cost her. "You should let them help you," I said. "You did not let anyone help you either, for the better part of an hour." "That's different." "How exactly?" I did not have a good answer for that, so I said nothing, and she allowed herself a small, tired smile at my silence. Outside, the courtyard was full of activity, soldiers securing the area, medics moving between the wounded, engineers already assessing what could be saved from the palace and what could not. Someone finally noticed the wound at my side and insisted on treating it right there, despite my protests that it could wait. The queen stood nearby while they worked, watching closely, as if making sure they did the job properly. "You did not have to stay for this part," I told her, wincing slightly as the medic cleaned the cut. "I stayed for the first part. I intend to stay for this one as well. Didn't peg you as the type to worry over a soldier's cuts and bruises." "I did not either," she admitted. 6 months ago, I would have called it beneath my attention. Today, I find I cannot look away." The medic finished, bandaging the wound tightly enough that I could move without too much trouble, and stepped back to check on the next injured person nearby. For a moment, it was just the two of us standing in the courtyard, surrounded by the wreckage of a palace that had stood for centuries and nearly fell in a single day. "They will not stop coming," she said quietly, looking toward the horizon where smoke still rose from the outer defenses. "Today was a defeat for them, but not the end of it. They want this moon back, and they will keep trying until they either take it or destroy it entirely. Then we'll keep holding doorways until they get tired of losing. That is not a strategy, that is stubbornness. Works about the same, in my experience." She looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind her eyes, before she spoke again. "Why did you really stay, Daniel? The truth this time, not another clever answer." I thought about deflecting again, about turning it into another joke to keep things light, the way I usually did. But something about the quiet after a battle makes people more honest than they mean to be, and I found myself answering plainly instead. "Because somewhere in the last 6 months, watching you skip meals so refugees could eat, watching you stay up nights rewriting evacuation routes by hand, Because you refuse to treat your people like numbers on a screen, I stopped seeing a job. I started seeing someone worth standing in front of. That's it. That's the whole reason. She did not answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. On my world, we have no simple word for what your people mean when they say friend. It is considered too small a word for something that large. But I think, after today, I finally understand why you use it so freely. It does not feel small at all. No, I agreed, watching the smoke curl into the sky above the broken palace. It doesn't. The dropships remained through the night, securing the grounds and preparing for the next wave of reinforcements expected by morning. Reports would be filed, medals would eventually be discussed, and somewhere in a command office far from this courtyard, someone would ask difficult questions about why a single soldier chose to disobey a direct order rather than abandon his post. I already knew what I would tell them, if they asked. I would tell them exactly what I told her, standing in that doorway with an army bearing down on us, and no clear path to survival. Some lines are not held because the odds favor you. They are held because somewhere before the fighting even started, you already decided you would not leave. The math never factors into it. The decision comes first, and everything after is simply the work of keeping that decision true. The Kryzen would come again. We both knew that. The war was far from finished, and there would be more doorways to hold, more nights like this one, and no guarantee that the next dropships would arrive in time. But for tonight, the palace still stood, however broken. The queen still lived, however tired, and I was still standing in front of her, however much it had cost me. That was enough. For tonight, that was enough.